This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Abam. We're going to speak today about Masechta Kesuvos Daf Nun. The Gemara says, talks about a takana. On the third line, Amar Ravila, Be'usha Hiskinu HaMevazvez Al Yevazvez Yosher Mechaimish. Someone who wants to give extravagantly should not give more than a fifth of his earnings to Tzedaka. One should not give more than 1/5 of money to Tzedaka. We know there's a concept of Masar, which is worthwhile to speak about in its own right. There are different shittos regarding Meiser. Is it a custom? Is it a D'Rabbanan? Is it a D'Oraisa? But now we're learning that if you want to give, you should not give more than a fifth. So, I would like to speak about a number of inyanim regarding this takana of Usha. And all of today's Maramakoimos come from the various Sfarim of the Chofetz Chaim, not the ones that are maybe commonly referred to. We're now going to read from the Sefer Likutei Halachos, which is what the Chofetz Chaim wrote on the Masechtas and Shas about Karbanos. Chofetz Chaim wrote 3 volumes, whether it's Yuma, Krisos, Zvachim, Chulin. The Chofetz Chaim wrote something called Likutei Halachos. So again, the Gemara says there's a takana not to give more than 1/5 of one's money for tzedakah. The Gemara in Yuma says, Tana Rabbanan, Ani va'ashir v'rasha ba'an ladin. In the end, in the final court case, after a person passes away, a poor man, a wealthy man, a wicked man, they come to be judged. La'ani oimrim lai, to the poor man they say, Mimnei malo yasakta b'Torah. Hey poor man, why were you not oisek in Torah? Im oimer ani hayis, if he says I was poor, v'tar b'mezaynos, I was busy making a living, oimrim lai, they say to him, Klum ani hayisa yosem Hillel, were you more poor than Hillel? Amru alav al Hillel hazakin shebachol yamayam hayoisa u'mistaker b'tarpik. Hillel was one of the poorest people who ever lived. Every day he made a tarpik. I don't know how much is a tarpik. $10. He gave half of it to the guard. And half for the people of his household. So the Chofetz Chaim points out, from here we see even someone who's exceptionally poor, is also obligated to establish times for learning. Chofetz Chaim says it's also muchach. Someone who's not able to learn on their own, and he has no choice but to hire a tutor, and he's poor. And basically this poor man has to profit from work that he does for others. So he makes a very, very meager salary. And if he's going to hire a malamed, it's going to really cut into his salary. Nevertheless, he has to be mitzamtzem his earnings and squeeze together some of his earnings. And live frugally. B'tzimtzum rav, meaning live in great deprivation. V'liskar echad she'amdiu taras Hashem, and hire someone to teach him. Meaning, even though it's going to mean you can't eat chicken for supper, you're going to eat toast and butter every night. And for Shabbos, you're not going to have all the dips, and you're not going to have all the trimmings. You're going to have to live a very frugal life. It doesn't matter. You need to learn. Learning is eternal life. You're worried about 70 years, 80 years, 90 years in this world? What about 1 billion years in the world to come? That's much more important. So, you don't have a car? So you don't have a car. You'll walk. You'll take public transportation. And you won't have a bungalow. And you won't go on vacation. And you get a suit every 10 years. But you have to learn. That's the most important thing. But then the Chofetz Chaim has a kasha. But why did Hillel give away half of his earnings? But the Gemara in Kesuvos says, "Hamevazbez al yevazbez yoser mechoimesh." Says the Chofetz Chaim, "Ve'enoi doimel lahad amrinan hamevazbez al yevazbez yoser mechoimesh." Zeu rak l'inyan tzedaka. The din of al yevazbez yoser mechoimesh is to give away to charity. Avoloi le'inyan Torah, not for learning Torah. Shehu mechuyav leida isa. You need to know the Torah. V'hi chayav lanetzach. That's your eternal life. You're right, you don't have to give more than a fifth of your money for tzedakah. But you got to give away whatever you can in order to know Torah. And if knowing Torah means you're going to have to give away half of your money for your earnings. You know, people say, I can't afford tuition. It's more than 50% of my parnasa. It could be 97% of your parnasa. Your kids have to learn Torah. It's not tzedakah. Doesn't matter what they charge. No, it's not right. They charge, whether it doesn't matter if it's right or not. You can't fight City Hall. But what you need to do is you need to educate your children the Torah. So when it comes to Yedias HaTorah, there's no cap. And therefore, says the Chofetz Chaim, certainly you should not spend money on luxuries. Because spending money on luxuries, you could have used that money to hire a better Rebbe to teach you Torah. In other words, it's kedai. Let's say a person should go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky and he should say, Reb Chaim, teach me Torah. I have Chofetz. I have to learn Kol HaTorah Kula. I don't know. I'll give you $1 million. $1 million. Maybe he would ask his son. His son would say, "Look, I have to have a yeshiva. You know, Kiryas Melech. You got to do it. Do whatever it takes." In other words, there's no cap when it comes to a person's learning. There's no cap. That's the first klal in the Gemara and Kesuvos of Al Yavaz Beis Yoser Mechaimish. Now I want to share with you. Just today, I want to learn halacha. But in the halacha, we'll see some lamdas. The Chofetz Chaim wrote a very important sefer. The name of the sefer is Avas Chesed. I regret when I was in yeshiva, for many, many years, we used to have a daily seder in Sefer Chofetz Chaim, the halachas of Lashon Hara, Sefer Shmiras Halashain, the Musar of Shmiras Halashain, and also Sefer Avas Chesed. It was a cycle. You would finish, again and again and again and again. So I used to say my Sefer Chofetz Chaim was red and my Avas Chesed was green. So that I looked at it like red light, green light. Red light is Lashon Hara, green light is Avas Chesed. But anyway, this comes from the Sefer Avas Chesed, and the Chofetz Chaim has a chapter basically on this Gemara, and a lot of very interesting things emerge. Chofetz Chaim, it's in parak, the 20th parak of the second chelek. As you see, they're very extensive footnotes. We're just going to read the top today. Isa b'Kesuvos daf nun heskinu chazal b'usha hamavazbeis al yivazbeis yoser mechamesh shema yitzarch lebriyos. Imloi mishehu ashir muflag. What if somebody's exceptionally wealthy? The guy's a billionaire, right? He's a billionaire. But he makes, let's say, $10 million a year. So he only has to give $1 million of tzedakah. I'm sorry, he's capped at $2 million. He has more money than he knows. He doesn't even know what to do with the money. He goes to the restaurant, he says, I want golden hamburgers. So they start shredding gold, and he's eating. I know people like this. The problem is that these people, they don't like to give tzedakah. They like to go, they literally have hamburgers shredded with gold and they eat it. It's edible. No, someone who's an oisher muflag, there's no takana vusha. Where does that come from? Mashma posting I love loy hoisa takana ayin baba kama daf tes. Okay, that's the first. So by the way, so far we've learned 2 exceptions. Number 1, for your own personal learning, there's no takana vusha. Number 2, if someone's an oisher muflag, there's no takana. Another thing, v'chein levazbeis koydem moisai, shebazel lo shayach shema yitzarch labriyos. What's the reason you're not to give more than a fifth? What's the reason you're not to give more than a fifth? Because you might need come on tzedakah. The guy's on his deathbed. They already said vidoy. At that point, you're allowed to give more than a fifth. So what do you mean? I have to leave over a big Yerusha for my grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I need to leave a Yerusha so that my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be able to afford the nursery school. You don't want to have to tell that to the malach. And basically, I don't want to get into this now, but the Chofetz Chaim has a very big footnote here from the Yesh Noichlim. I think the father of the Chidah, who basically says that on the one hand, a person should be concerned with their offspring, that they have something respectable, and on the other hand, the person has to be concerned with their own neshama. And therefore, you should make both of them happy. Meaning, you leave over to your family, but you should also, you should leave over something generous for your own eternal zchus. That's the conclusion of the Chofetz Chaim. But he says, to give before one's death, if you look in your Ardea Reish Mem Tes, so you could give as much as you want. Some say up to a third or up to half, but not more. Okay, interesting. Not more than half. Up to a third or half. So al Yevazbeis is b'chayav, koydem misa, up to a third or half. We find in the Gemara in Kesuvos, Daf Samach Zayin, it will be there in only 4 months by Mar Ukva. Sha'amar koydem moisai, kishes boinim b'tzedaka sh'asal b'mei chayav Mar Ukva. Before his death, when he contemplated the minimal tzedakah he gave in his life, he said, Archa rachikta uzvadin kalila. It's a long journey, and I have very light suitcases. So what did he do? Ufalginu l'nechasav l'tzedakah. He divvied out his assets for tzedakah. Next, the Chofetz Chaim brings another opinion here. Yeshoimrim dahad arminan al yevazvez yosem mechoimesh hainu b'sharoitza meyatzmei lechapes achar aniyim malchayk lehem tzedakah. You know when you can't give more than a fifth? When you're looking for people to give to. But if hungry people come to you, people who don't have clothing, you have an obligation to give them food and to cover them, like the Torah says, "Dei machsar shayach salai." Or let's say you hear a story of pidyon shvuyim, oy sheyira shvuyim, shu chayiv liftoisam, kasher tziva Hashem yisbarach, or ritzoyne l'aseh al zayosim mechash. You have people, right? You know, like in the Ukraine. You have a situation of pidyon shvuyim, and you want to give more than a fifth. You're allowed to. The din al yevazbeis is when you on your own are being yevazbeis. You're going out on your own and you're looking for who to give to. But if you know people need, you're allowed to give more than a fifth. It's the right thing to do. By the way, I just want to point out, and this is not the topic of the Shiur, but we know there's a concept of Meiser, there's a concept of Chomesh. It is a very big Sugya, whether perhaps Chomesh is not just discretionary, but perhaps obligatory. It seems to be the opinion of the Rambam and the conclusion of the Gra, and the Chofetz Chaim speaks about this at length, about when does Maaser apply and when does Chomesh apply. But that's not the subject of today. Today is one really capped out on a fifth. So number one, we're learning for your own learning, there's no shiur. Number two, if someone's an oisher milflag, there's no shiur. Number three, before misa, there's no shiur. Number four, if there are people who need, you're allowed to give more. Furthermore, it's v'nira d'mayri ba'ofen she'eino igel lepikuach nefesh mamish. We're talking about in a situation that it's not noigeya mamish for pikuach nefesh. If noigeya lepikuach nefesh mamish, somebody's life is on the line, where the shavui is about to die, the hungry person might come to sakana, there is no shiur of chomesh. We only say your life comes before the life of your friend, but we never say your wallet comes before your friend's life. Next, another exception. V'da demasheskinu chazal shaloi lefazer nira dahainu dafka kishamavazes nichsei beisai adezeh hapizor. You know what it means? Don't give more than a fifth. Don't give away your couch and your refrigerator. Like it says hamavazbez. Avo b'davar muad, a small amount. Let's say you have a steady job. Yechveis, you work 9 to 5 and you make $100,000 a year. and every day, every week, you bring home a salary, and it's more than you need. Let's say your weekly expenses are, I don't know, if you're making $100,000 a year, so what's that, $2,000 a week? Let's say you only need $1,500 a week to live. And you're bringing home every week $500 extra. You could give it all to tzedakah. The din is hamafazer is when you need it. If you don't need it, you could give it away. It's talking about, so what does it mean hamavazbes? It's giving away your living room, your couch, your furniture, your car. But you just have extra cash sitting around. You're allowed to give more than a fifth, Chofetz Chaim says. Next. Says the Chofetz Chaim, a chidush nifla ma'oid, quoting the Shita Mekubetzes and our Gemara. The whole din of don't give more than a fifth is when you're giving to Tzedaka, Chai Lifeline, RCCS, Tamchei Shabbos. But to support Torah, give it all away. Why? Because it's a business deal. You're getting something in return. You get the schar of the learning that you support. So how could you max someone out? He wants to buy more Torah. So, and now the chidush here is not this shita. This is a shita mekubetzes. The chidush is the Chofetz Chaim is paskening this way. Chofetz Chaim says, "V'dali the cholikar atagano stam tzedaka v'achzakas haTorah mitzadei b'sefer shita mekubetzes." So shaykh ze klal. There's no din of you're capped out at a fifth. By the way, all of this really heightens, I think most people today, if they could take out their record books and show, I give meiser, they think, wow, they're mamish, a big Baal Tzedaka. Most people don't think maybe there's something called a Chumash, but here we're learning beyond Chumash. I remember I was very moved. Rabbi Reisman, I once heard this many years ago, said a story that his father, maybe B'Soif Yamav, came to the yeshiva Tarvadas, and he said, I want to speak with you. So Rabbi Reisman came out, he sat in his father's car, and his father said, I have to ask you for mechila. So he said, for what? He said, I gave a lot of tzedakah. He said, you gave more than meiser? He said, I gave a lot more than chomesh, and it came out of your Yerusha. And I asked you for mechila, but somebody like you see why he was zoicha to such a son. But Rabbi Reisman said over how the extent of his father's generosity. But anyway, Chofetz Chaim explains what's the reason for why hachzakas haTorah you give more than a fifth. Because you have a share in the person's learning. That's why Zvulun was the third of the Nesiim, because he loved the Torah. Okay, so that's the Chiddush of the Shita. The Chofetz Chaim paskins that way. Okay, let's see the story. Chofetz Chaim brings a story from Koheles about Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was a good scribe, and he made 3 sela a week. He ate with one, he provided shelter with one, and he supported chachamim with one. His talmidim said, Rebbe, what are your children going to do? So what's the problem? If they're tzaddikim, David said, Lo yisi tzaddik nezav, v'zarim v'akers lachem. And if they're not good, why would I leave money to oivei hamakim? Rabbi Meir said. There's another medrash. If somebody learns Torah, teaches Torah, observes the Torah, fulfills the Torah, but he could have supported Torah and he didn't, what do we say? Orur asher lo yakum es divrei haTorah hazois. But someone who didn't learn, didn't teach, didn't observe, and he didn't really have the capacity to support Torah, and he did, he's Baruch Asher Yaakov, meaning the difference between someone who's on the winning team and not, more than learning, is supporting. You could ask, all of these, Adirei HaTorah, right? Adirei HaTorah. You know, they have this big movement in Lakewood of supporting Torah. You ever wonder, what are they doing having the movement in Lakewood? In Lakewood, they're learning. They should have the movement everywhere else but there. The facts are, most Hachzakas HaTorah comes from people who learn Torah. It's an unbelievable thing. The reality is that people who learn, they understand the value and they support. But the Chofetz Chaim said there is no takanas usha on Hachzakas HaTorah. So the Chofetz Chaim says from here we learn how careful a person has to be, how they spend their money. Because if even Tzedaka, which is the most important thing, Chazal say, okay, there's an amount up to a fifth, certainly when it comes to just extravagantly spending money. Let's end off with one detail. I looked for this for many years. I wasn't always able to find it. This is a very big chizuk. People who are makbid to give meiser and chomesh have a maila over people who even give a lot of tzedakah. Some people they don't necessarily give meiser. They're very generous. They give a lot, but they don't have a notion of giving, let's say, meiser or chomesh. Chofetz Chaim says there's a very big advantage of giving in an oifen where you're giving a meiser or you're giving chomesh. The tzedakah is much greater than someone who just gives a lot of tzedakah. Maybe, let's say you have a very wealthy, generous guy, and he's giving millions of dollars every year. But he doesn't have a cheshbon, he's giving meiser or chomesh. He might even be giving 40%. There's a maila over giving, the meiser and the chomesh. Why? Because if you just give tzedakah, all you have is a mitzvah of tzedakah. But when you go to work, you're just going to work. But if somebody has a cheshbon, I'm giving 10%, I'm giving 20%, then when you go to work, your work is a mitzvah, because you're a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your avodah is a mitzvah. So it's not just the tzedakah is a mitzvah, the labor, the work is a mitzvah. Because all the work you do, you're working 9 to 5, you're working for the tzedakah, you're working for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're working for the Torah. So this is all on, so just to review, the Gemara says, the Chofetz Chaim in Likutei Halacha says it doesn't apply to your own learning. In Avas Chesed, the Chofetz Chaim says it does not apply to Oin Oisher Muflag. Doesn't apply Kaida Misa. It doesn't apply when there are needy people who actively need. It only applies when you want to go out of your way looking to give. It doesn't apply if you make more money than you need. That's number 6. It doesn't apply to Hachzakas HaTorah. So again, it's a rule and it's a takana, but there are a number of exceptions, which are none of them are mentioned in the Gemara. Chofetz Chaim writes in many places that when a person gives, the person never loses out. It's like a candle. Ner la'echad, ner la'mei. The Rebbeinu Shalom is mashlam. Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful day. Bracha v'atzlacha. Kol tov, everyone. Be well.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.